Yeah, so my name is Oliver Eichenberg. So I'm the global QA and RA manager at Pure Global. Actually, I have 30 years experience or background in the medical device field. So I started a long, long time ago, just when the in Europe the CE mark was actually new. And I've experienced over this time 15 years in the industry and 15 years in the consultancy space. So, and have seen a lot of these medical device companies and a lot of changes over time. Yeah, so with this, I'm giving it to Julian.
Hi everyone, I'm Giulia Guerreschi. I have 5 years or so experience now in the medical device industry. I'm originally from Italy, as my name can show, but I've been living now in the Netherlands for the last 6 years or so. So I partially see now the Netherlands as my new home. And on the topic of Netherlands, Michael, floor to you. Also in the Netherlands with me.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. So my name is Michael Vanderwood. I've been in the medical device, global market access, international business development space for more than 20 years now. Lived in the US for many years and back in the Netherlands since about 5 years. A little bit about my personal interest and experience in this field. I know from experience that, expanding into global markets can be complicated and costly. I've done it many times. Also worked with many companies who have been going through this process. And our focus has always been, we want to make the required regulatory part of having to going into global markets as easy and affordable as possible. So that all companies, not just the bigger companies with deep pockets, but all companies, smaller and mid-sized companies, can bring innovative technologies into markets all over the world. And hopefully, during this session, we'll be able to talk a little bit more about this and how we try to make that happen. So thank you everyone for attending. So I'm going to do just a one-slide introduction on Pure Global, which is the organization represented by the three of us. We provide medical device market access to more than 30 markets worldwide. We're a young company. We've been in existence now for 5 years. First 2 years, a lot of the focus was more on FDA, was more on clinical, and we really kind of switched focus to global market access in the last 3 years with a new approach in mind, as I mentioned earlier. So we're a young company, but we have a lot of experience within the business all over the world. We have teams all over the world. The blue markets are the markets where we can support medical device companies. The red dots actually represent our own offices. So we have put a lot of effort into opening up offices and bringing in local regulatory staff to support our customers. And 13, and this is really key to the solutions that we offer to our customers, is that 13 of the red dots are actually representation entities. So these are markets where we, through one of our own Pure Global offices, supported by our own staff, can offer representation and registration support. And that allows us to offer this in a more innovative way, since we are building this in-house and not relying on partners in these markets to make this happen. So that's a very short introduction. We want to make this an interactive session. I think Sean already mentioned that as well, right? So please feel free. We don't have an official presentation. We have a few slides we're going to go through. We hope that the slides will trigger some comments, questions. So feel free to interrupt, or to write something in chat if you want us to focus on something specific, or if you want to share one of your own experiences of the things we're going to be talking about. But I'm going to hand over to Julia for now.
Yes, thank you, Michael. So, global market access. Here we can see a general landscape of global market access potential countries for entering your medical devices. Of course, we can start off with the United States. This remains the largest single market globally, right, that we're aware of for medical device placement. Similarly, of course, we have Europe, right, in the European Economic Area, which covers together around 30 countries. And there is Asia, where we see there are several high growth markets, such as Japan and China. There are major contributors with strong regulatory frameworks and increasing demand. South Korea and Singapore also stand out as efficient, and expanded reviews pathways right from the authorities, the local authorities there, making them very attractive markets actually in the Asia region. Emerging markets like Vietnam, for example, or Indonesia, also are, although they're smaller today, they are still growing rapidly. So it's also important to keep them in mind as well, as potential markets to expand in the region. While then we can go to Latin America. For example, if we look at Brazil and Mexico, they are known as the leading markets in that area of the world. Brazil, especially offering strong potential because of the alignment with the FDA pathway. Mexico, also now recently, since September or so, becoming more accessible due to the new abbreviated pathway, right, and approval routes. So we're not limiting anymore to FDA, but actually now it's accepting also CE, which of course improves the speed to market. And then going back to the center right here, we can go to the Middle East. Countries like the UAE and Saudi are also investing heavily in healthcare recently, creating new opportunities for manufacturers to enter these countries. Even there, CE is currently seen as a primary pathway across those countries as well, in general, most markets. Where these authorities, local authorities, are really relying on CE and supporting CE as the evidence for local registrations. And then, of course, we can go to markets like Australia and UK, which also remain important because they're very much stable. They're known regulatory systems. And again, here you can leverage CE marking to enter both. So really, if we look at this map, the key takeaway, considering the countries just mentioned, right, is that combining CE and FDA approval can unlock access to more than 25 or so markets globally. Often this means faster timelines, right, in comparison to pursuing each market individually or independently, rather. So, this helps out strategically because then manufacturers can ensure that they can align their regulatory approach across with these two pathways in all the different countries or markets rather that they want to enter. And so here I give the floor to Oliver to actually go into the specifics about how you can use FDA and CE approval to go into your specific countries.
Thanks, Julia. Yeah, so on the next slide here, you can see, we broke it down to, okay, how can you use FDA going global? So, as Julia mentioned, so the CE or the FDA could be a significant strategic, financial, and business advantage for you to streamline this expansion into new markets. But what are these markets? Here, actually, we separated this in two leverage levels. So FDA accepted, for example, for Israel and Japan, quite new in Japan, and also FDA supportive, which means it is recognized by FDA, or FDA is recognized and allows a bridge pathway or reduces definitely significantly the time to market. And here you can see that there are a number of countries. Maybe the list is not yet complete, but we selected Saudi Arabia, Brazil, Mexico, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, India, Australia, Canada, Taiwan, Hong Kong, South Korea. So there are a lot of opportunities here just with the FDA to grow global. And if you look at the next slide, it's even more for CE. So when you have the CE, in some countries, you have a direct recognition. In other countries, the leverage level is more that this is is accepted, like the UK, but still you need to, of course, comply with the country regulations. And then it is supportive, which means that you again have the local approval required. And you can see that there are a significant number of countries where you can use your existing CE to go global. There are, of course, a few whatever limitation. It might depend also on the class of device. You might have um, a specific limitation for legacy devices, so this could happen. But overall, this just shows you, okay, there are a lot of opportunities from when you have CE marking, and it is worth then to consider, okay, what opportunities do I have to go global into these markets? Yeah. And okay, so how do you do the medical device registration submission? And we have here on the left side the traditional, and I will take the traditional because, as I mentioned earlier, so I'm in this space since 30 years. I have seen all these ways. How is it done in the past? So the traditional way is, okay, you're doing your manual research. Even in the earlier years, there was no whatever internet or database. You have to go to the library and search. Nowadays, you have all this, but you still need to search across the country-specific regulation. This takes a lot of time. Then you have the medical device dossier or the technical documentation, assembly and review. Um, so also for this, you will go through, or is a traditional way is to go through this to do a gap analysis and completeness check manually. Then you to assembly the technical documentation, review it again, update documents, be consistent, make sure that everything is complete. Avoid redundancies in multiple documents. So this is a traditional way of doing this. And then finally also doing the registration submission, which could be also very time-consuming and administrative work from the RA persons or QA persons. So overall, it is what has been used from many people who are still working in the QA/RA field, but we all know it's a lot of administrative work and it is less efficient. And of course, it is associated with resources and higher costs. So let's look on the other side what AI can do and how AI can support this today.
Yeah, on the other hand, indeed, AI actually, when it comes down to regulatory updates, can help you already scan, right, the country databases and regulation and authority websites without you going one by one manually. So that in itself already saves a lot of time for us as RA experts to see which information, which update is actually really relevant. Instead, we have the AI supporting the scanning. And what we do is then check one by one which we want to bring forward, right, and to help our clients. Overall, then one can assume that around half the time already is saved because of the initial scanning. Of course, it could be even more depending on the updates actually occurring. However, I think the biggest support from AI, in my opinion at least, comes when it to the medical device dossier assembly and review, and then the submission to each authority of the market selected, right? You can have AI help you create an initial completeness check to see really what documents were provided and what could be missing. For example, if that's a DOC or a GSPR. Also, that means it can lead to reviewing an initial gap analysis, right? And making sure that documents provided by the manufacturer are structured in the order that you need for the submission. That arguably is a lot of admin work, right? That already the AI can save you time and help you. Of course, this does not mean that the specialist is not there anymore. The RA specialist then is involved because they conduct a detailed review, right, of the documents provided based on the initial assessment done by AI. if you think about it, that initial assessment can already minimize review time by around 40 or 50%, depending, of course, on the quality of the documentation provided by the manufacturer in question. At the same time, if you already have AI helping you do the initial completeness check, that review can then be leveraged for other markets. So, for example, if we're starting off with Mexico, I can already use this review for Mexico, but then I can already leverage it for maybe Colombia, right? I don't have to do double the work anymore. Instead, I focus on the specific national requirements or components, right, that I need for the specific submission of that country. And that, of course, then leads to, overall the registration submission time and the preparation of it already cuts so much by having AI do the admin work. And in the end, it also saves time for the manufacturer because we can work then in parallel thanks to these tools that support us in our reviews. So that's why we conclude that in the end, having AI supported tools when it comes down to registration submissions become more time and cost effective overall per market registration.
Yeah, Julia, there's a question from Danielle.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, there's a question in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
If we have data on how much time is saved when you go from traditional to AI supported. Now you're making a generic up to 50%, right? But we have been working with it for a while, right?
Correct. We have. We actually, as Pure Global, have a few builders that we've been using. Brazil being the first one we actually started working on, and the Brazil team at Pure Global actually ended up telling us that when they use the builder to support them, around 50-60% of the time for them is actually saved thanks to AI, because there's a lot of admin work originally, right? And now we're seeing that the same is applicable for countries as well, like Mexico, which is another strong builder that we started using, in Thailand as well. So we're trying, as Pure Global, we started off with one country, and that same concept, we're expanding it to different countries because we see how efficient it is, the system. So I hope this answers your question, but I would say in the case of Brazil, we're talking about 50-60%.
Thank you.
Michael, floor to you.
Yeah, my favorite topic. So along with a different way of being able to, to collect the document, the required documentation, compile and translate the dossier, and all the time savings associated with it because of using AI, in-house developed AI tools. We also, you can also expect, and you should also expect, a different type of pricing structure, right? So again, of course the traditional way, Oliver earlier said, how many years he's been in the regulatory field, and he knows how registrations have been built the traditional way. The same can be said, from my experience, right? 20 plus years. You charge an annual fee to act as the representative. You charge a consulting fee to do the technical file dossier compilation. You charge for translations. Once the device has been registered, if anything needs to be changed, if you need to change something, add a model. If you want to, in some markets, if you want to add a distributor, any other changes, administrative or technical changes, then trigger another consulting fee. If the regulatory authorities contact the representative and they have questions about the product because they receive some feedback out of the field from a hospital, from a doctor, from a patient, and they're doing an inquiry, hourly consulting rates are being charged, and all of this is already put together, is already agreed to in a contract, and you cannot do anything against it, right? So it's lawyer-like billing, and because you're dealing with the representative is in control, and you don't have a choice but to pay, right? So that is what we want to change, and because of the efficiencies that we gain with compiling the dossiers, translating dossiers, and the 50-60% efficiency gain. We applied the same can be applied to modifications, and because we have our own offices with our own teams in place. We feel that if there's an AI supported approach, it should also be AI supported pricing, and that we should expect to happen more. I think in the industry is that the annual fee becomes an all-inclusive fee. So it does not matter what activities are happening in the market. You're paying an annual fee. All the activities I mentioned earlier are included in the annual fee, and there are no surprises and no additional consulting fees being charged. And that is directly linked to being able to have a more efficient approach to getting the submissions done in these local markets. Think only about translations. Translations used to be such a high cost element of entering a new market, and now you have all the AI translation tools out there that make it so easy to do translations, and there's no need anymore to charge for all these activities piecemeal, because we know that there are efficient ways to put together the submissions and any other post-market type activities. So you're going from unpredictable costs, right, that can be charged at any point throughout the contract to more of a subscription type contract. When you sign for a 3-year contract, you're paying annual fee, and it's everything that needs to be done to get and to keep the product on market is included in the annual fee. Go to the next slide, Julia.
There is a question in the chat box from Pete. He asks, how do you provide evidence that the translations are validated?
Yeah, good question, and we get that question more often. We're including the translations that are required during the submission process, right? So, and the regulatory consultant, the local regulatory consultant or expert, would typically do this him or herself in the past, and it is now done with the support of AI. If certified translations are required, or validated translations, then that's a separate step we would have to look at. So and Julia will show a little bit later how this works in practice by taking away, basically, we're taking away the translation burden and activity away from the local consultant and having AI prepare it, and then it gets reviewed by the local consultant before it gets used for the submission.
Yeah, maybe just to add, I guess we also need to separate translations, which are used for the submission, where it is, of course, then accepted to have whatever AI tool or so. And the translations, which are specifically focused on the labeling, which is put then on the market and then are used for the device itself, for the user, and which is then used and written by the user. So this, of course, is then under the final responsibility of the manufacturer and must be, in the end, controlled by the manufacturer and released by the manufacturer. And of course, this process might be supported by AI, but there must be an expert at the end looking at this, or a specific whatever service provider who has the qualification for this and then releasing this. So I guess there are two elements discussing these questions of translations. But for the submission itself, these kind of burden and these kind of translations, these, in my understanding, do not need to be whatever validated or so. And automatically, quite often, even the systems do checks is at least for consistency and then also for completeness.
Yeah. Thanks, Oliver. And this is an example, and this is an example of how the annual fee can work. This is on our website, but we have published our pricing on our website. So we have a fee calculator, and basically you select the markets you're interested in, and you indicate how many listings, the risk level of the product, and it will calculate the annual fee that is paid, and it will also provide the government fees that are charged in that market for these products. So it's a very transparent, predictable cost structure, which we feel is the future.
Thank you, Michael. So I think here we can start showing a little bit actually the document builder that I was mentioning earlier about how AI can actually support us in the registration submissions to the local authorities. So here you have a few screenshots that show actually how Pure Global's builder works. And again, I also want to emphasize that this is an internal tool that Pure Global is using and their specialists are using. It's not currently being sold anywhere. So it's just for us to use to support our work as representatives in the countries in question. So first of all, what happens is that we upload all documentation provided by the manufacturer in the tool and let the tool start a completeness check to see what potential documents are missing, if that is maybe a risk management report or a CER. So then we get an input from the builder on what documentation potentially is missing to conduct then the gap analysis. Then, at the same time, the builder starts extracting all the information from the provided documents based on the registration requirements. So there are already within the builder information that we know is required to be filled out in the administrative forms to the authorities. So the information then gets pre-filled, translated into the languages in question. And again, here, the translation is specific from an admin perspective for the forms. So we're not talking about labeling. We're not talking about IFU. We're specifically talking about administrative forms that need to be submitted to the authorities to conduct the national registration, right? On behalf of the manufacturer as their representative or registration holder, depending on the country in question. The form gets the information, gets pre-filled, translated, and then structured, and then the RA specialist, the local specialist, starts reviewing the information provided by the bot, including the translation of the builder and what they did. So the specialist can easily edit that information in case it's incorrect, right? So it's not that the builder gives you something and you have to go with it. No, it gives the ability as a starting point, and then the specialist can add to it if it notices that information is missing or the information extracted may be incorrect.
I've got a question.
Yes, Michelle.
Is the translation certified? Because that's a big thing that the notified bodies are looking for, is the certification of the translation house.
Which is why, as I mentioned, it's not about labeling an IFU. Most of the time, notified bodies check the translation that is certified, you're right, in relation to labeling an IFU. We are not conducting that, Michelle, right? Our focus is specific to the documents, or the forms, rather, I should say, for the authorities. So here, actually, in the screen, you can see an Anvisa form. This form is Brazil, right? The form is filled, it needs to be filled in Portuguese. So to help our local specialists, right, who are Portuguese natives, but to help them out fill it out, they can already have the AI builder fill that information for them in Portuguese, and then they can check it in case it's incorrect, for example, or say maybe the builder made a mistake and put something in English, right? Then the specialist can go check it and say, oh, actually, this needs to be in Portuguese. Let me translate it. But at least it saves them time instead of filling out each component one by one themselves. So that's the idea, right, of the translation section of the tool.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So continuing here, we can see another few screenshots of how the document builder works. So the information, of course, again, gets reviewed and placed in the applicable administrative templates or forms rather, in the structure that needs to be submitted to the local authority. The builder, as mentioned earlier, pre-fills the selected templates, updates the structure as need be, translates the documentation related again to the admin forms into the local language, and makes it ready for submission. Then the specialist can download this pre-filled information and start reviewing, right, the final content, right, for the pre-submission and the translation as well. Finally, when everything has been reviewed by the RA specialist and they deem it's ready to go, of course, they, as specialists, submit the final documentation to the competent authority, either in the portal or physically, such as in the case of Mexico. Unfortunately, there it takes more time because the specialists need to print everything out, make an appointment with the Kofi priest, and physically go there and submit your registration.
Yes, thanks, Julia. And I want to add is what's very interesting is when you look at time saving, part of it is, of course, not having to fill out this form by hand, right? It gets filled out through the AI builder, and then, as Julia said, already in Portuguese. So it takes the required information from the documents that have been provided that needs to be filled in the form, needs to be provided in the form, but it's all information that already exists in the documentation. So the AI builder finds it, pre-fills it, and then in translated form. So instead of the consultants having to do this by hand themselves. But what they also mentioned is that, for example, the gap analysis, you can imagine that if there's a lot of documentation, it does take a long time to, obviously either a human or the AI builder to do the analysis. And what they mentioned is that, they could run the builder, go to lunch, come back, and it's complete. Or if it's even much bigger file, they may just start it before they leave at the end of the day, and the next morning they come back in. It's there, it's done. And while it's running, if they're doing it during, while they're still present, they can do other things. So it's not just the administrative pieces being the time savings is not just in the administrative pieces being handled by the AI bot, but it's also you can multitask a lot easier, and so that all adds up to more efficiency, also just in a day's work.
Yeah, that's correct.
And I guess there was one question about the completeness and consistency. And I just want to comment on this, that this is, of course, this is included in the builder. So because AI will select one information, it would also notice then if this is maybe different in other spaces, or even it would fill in only this one information and then in the applicable fields and make it consistent, maybe more consistent than a human could do. But in the end, you can see it and you can double check, of course, this information. And this is always where the experts then have a close look at.
Yeah, and there was another question asking if the builder pulls the information from all the documentation uploaded. Yes, it does, unless the specialist unselects some documentation. So that is also in the power of the specialist to see, to us, the document builder, from where to pull the information. Usually it is from all documents, but if they want something specific, then they can select specific documents and pull the information from there.
Yeah. So I guess usually the experience is that we select specific documents which are required for a specific builder or for a specific form, and we then automatically pre-select this so that this information is or can be just searched out of these documents. So for example, 15 to 20 key documents, they are uploaded and then the form can be filled out automatically.
Yeah, and then back to what Oliver presented earlier about accessing markets with and basically leveraging CE or FDA, is that And then if taking Brazil as an example, where a lot of the documentation that is needed for a Brazil for an Anvisa registration already exists within the CE technical documentation file. So that's why. So so we can ask a client to, if they already have CE marking, provide us your technical documentation file, and then we'll do the rest.
Yeah.
Right.
And then once it's in the builder, if we're doing it for Brazil, then we can use the same documentation for other countries as well, because it just works the same way, right? So it makes it also more efficient for us to then submit it to the new countries that the manufacturer wants to add in the scope.
Yep.
But then again, we always have challenges, right? So here I think is what we want to ask you as an audience. What are common challenges you're facing currently or have faced in the past as maybe manufacturers trying to enter all these markets? We only listed out a few here in our slide, but we also want to hear your opinion and to see how maybe Pure Global in general we can help, right, and find solution to these common challenges.
Yeah. Yeah, a big question for me to take the first topic at the left top. Yes, when you go into these markets, most markets, you need to have a local representative, right? An authorized representative or a license holder, a registrant, a sponsor, marketing authorization holder, whatever it's called, legal representative, all kinds of different terminology, but it all basically comes down to the same thing, is that you need to have someone in that market, and it's, in some cases it's a person, but often it's also an entity who has to hold the registration in that market, or is the point person for the local authorities to with if they have questions, because they want to be able to go someone local. We're all familiar with that principle, but I think we still see a lot of companies, and I think from a cost perspective and maybe from an ease perspective, selecting their distributor also to hold the registration. And does not have to be a bad decision, but it needs to be strategically thought through, which is very important, because there are markets where where the local registration holder has total control of the registration and determines who imports products, determines who gets added as distributor. You have to think about that if the commercial relationship with a distributor does not go well, which happens, right? It happens to all of us. The local partner may not fulfill its obligations, or you may come to a disagreement. That they then have to hold that as an ace card in their hand. Now, not all markets are the same. There are markets where it's very easy to change a representative. Or where it's very easy to re-register, or maybe the market is not as important commercially, and then it doesn't have that much impact. But I think the only thing, I think what we always emphasize is at least think about it strategically. Just like you would think about as a business, do I set up a sales office, or do I work with a commercial distributor to distribute my products in that particular market? That could also differ from market to market, depending on the strategic importance of a market and your strategic goals. The same you should do with deciding who holds the registration. We do the same thing. I mean, like I said, we can support you, we can support manufacturers in more than 30 markets, but we decided to set up our own office in 15. And in the other markets, we decided to work with a partner, because we did not think it was not as important for us to have our own office there. But in the key markets where we believe it's most important to have a local presence, we set up our own office, and we have our own people. So I don't know if that's an area I think that is very important and a very early decision to make when looking at a new market.
I'm curious to hear from the people in Europe on the call with regard to local distributors and authorized representatives. I heard on a call, Europe is not a unified market um, from an investor's perspective. The investor was saying, the US is a giant unified market. Um, True, you have all sorts of distribution challenges, sales challenges, market challenges, getting on hospital systems and reimbursement plans. But you multiply that by 28 or 30 when you move into Europe. What is your experience with that? Obviously registration is the first step in in entering these markets. Anyone have any comment on that or not? Okay.
Sean, let me try. Um, I, so the whole point of the CE mark is to address all of the variety. I mean, talking about working in the area for a long time, when I arrived in Italy, there were no directives, and every country was different. So I think the issue is the variation is when you conduct a clinical study throughout Europe, you may have differences in competent authority approaches. I don't think they're dramatic, but they can be different. Some countries can be more logical in their approach, and some countries can be more challenging. And then you have the language issue. But what you were saying, I mean, comparing the U.S. or I think that's what you were doing or what they were doing to the variation in Europe. Yes, there are variations during the process of getting the CE mark, and of course, everybody knows that there are variations in notified bodies and what they think. So that's where the variation is. If you can get past that and you have your CE mark, then now that the more I'm saying, the more I'm agreeing that there's a problem here. But of course, then you have local marketing issues that you have to deal with as well, and also reimbursement issues because in the U.S. there's an advantage of having basically one system, whereas in Europe each reimbursement, each system in Europe, country in Europe has different reimbursement. I think I've just made an argument or made points that support the problem of variation in Europe, and my intention was to actually talk about the benefits of the CE mark. So I did not meet my own objective.
I think you did both. I, and deepen the conversation, so I appreciate
Go ahead, Michael, fix it.
it.
Great. Yes, great idea.
No, I mean, CE is kind of a starting point, right? So I think, yes, you need CE to be able to sell your products anywhere in the European Union, which is a huge market, of course. A lot of people. That the markets differ, totally agree, right? I mean, obviously, it's completely different to try to sell your product in Germany than it is in France or Spain. I mean, that's so commercially, yes, you need to look really from one market to the next and have a strategy in place. How are you going to roll out throughout Europe? But CE does give you access, right? So CE is the first step, and you need one authorized representative for all of the European Union. And but I agree with you that after obtaining CE, which gives you, as an additional benefit, not only access to the EU, but also to a lot of these other markets around the world that are looking for CE type documentation. But then, yeah, the commercial side is another matter. Totally agree. Are you looking for Carrie, or are you looking for something else?
So let's hear from our MDSAP enthusiast, Paul, and what MDSAP brings into the mix versus ISO 13485.
Another mess. Just kidding.
Sorry, I'm a troublemaker today.
Yeah, so if we look at the challenges from the QMS, so actually, I guess we have all seen a lot of harmonization and changes over the last years. And we all know it has not stopped. So just look at the QMSR just coming into effect in February this year. You could see in China there are significant updates also to the Chinese GMP aligned with these 1345, but adding also additional requirements. So you can look at worldwide, actually, it is still a continuing process that this is more harmonized, but it still keeps also the country legislation and a lot of historical aspects so that whenever you move into a new country or when you consider global market access, so the QMS requirements to consider and to update your QMS according to the applicable maybe legislation then is of course required. And I've seen this so many times even these small changes with CE when people are moving to the, for example, just for Europe and just applying for UK or for Switzerland, but the QMS is not reflecting whatever the vigilance or PMS procedure respecting the UK or the Swiss legislation. So yeah. So, and everybody knows that the QMS is the umbrella for everything actually, and is driving all these changes, and that this is required. But I guess we are still seeing a lot of challenges, or that these QMS are not updated. And of course, in the end, it could then end up in a delay to market, right? Because you are missing something, you need to update this. Nobody knows how to do this. Okay, we can support in all this, but I guess also the databases and the way how this registration is done in databases, how this is searched. This is also, or these searches are looking also at compliance, and this is also focusing on QMS. So a good 13.5 or MDSAP is helpful for many, many markets, and but it is also important, yeah, to comply with all these regulations and to consider this to avoid then delays in global market placements.
Can I just jump in here?
Yeah.
I think reimbursement is really important because I've already gone through an exercise in the past with one company and they got a CE mark and they said, okay, we're going to market. And I said, well, what about reimbursement? And they said, what? Reimbursement? So they spent 2 years, which they didn't have market access. And I guess my question to Pure Global is, do you cover reimbursement? And I just want to add one comment, a completely separate topic. I'm of the opinion that everything has to be validated that gets submitted to regulatory authorities or will be reviewed by regulatory authorities. It has to be validated. I'm using AI tools to do my grammar check, my translations and stuff, and I got a bunch of garbage out this week. So um, I'm a true believer in validation, and it has to be correct. And you also have to consider the liability issues associated with poor translation. Thanks. And actually, my question was with reimbursement. Do you guys cover reimbursement as well? Because that is, for me, something that has to be considered at the same time as looking at the regulatory strategy for market access.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree with you that it's an element you need to consider very early on in the process. In some markets, we offer also support with reimbursement, but we're not reimbursement specialists. So if a reimbursement specialist is needed, then we do have some people in our network we can refer to. But there are some markets where the local representative also is involved in reimbursement or in applying for tenders, for example, which we can then do. But we're not reimbursement specialists.
Thank you.
And just for the validation, so maybe just look at this example. So in the past, or when we had, for example, compiled a 510K, so you had to write these 21 sections. So you write it, you put in the information. And of course, if this information was not written in the original language, then you have translated it. I have seen no actually manufacturer providing here validated information for this. The content, what you include and what you simply submit, this is just in the submission. This needs to be clearly separated from everything what is placed on the market or kept on a medical device file. Yeah. So this, and I'm not aware of any legal requirement actually that this is, FDA do accept this. FDA has every regulatory authority. So this is simply where you can include the information, and this is up to you finally. For example, a general description of your device or a summary report. Okay, if you have a test report, if you have something, then the manufacturer usually translate it on their own, and then they put a stamp on it or maybe confirm this. But usually also this is not specifically. I've never seen FDA coming back and questioning this. So that's why what specifically also what Julia mentioned, there needs to be a separation, and this is what we clearly mentioned in the information from the form. It's not what you submit on the labeling to the market. It's just for the submission of this and for the approval of the device.
I have been involved in the validation of all the labeling and the regulatory documentation being submitted. And it's been more than one company in which it was a core piece in which the documentation that was being submitted, including the labeling, was validated. And of course, with a poor translation, the user might use the device incorrectly. And then you go into other problems like liability. Who is then liable for the damage?
No, this is
that
exactly what I
particular
said.
user?
When you place it to the market, the manufacturer is responsible. Everything what the manufacturer keeps as labeling and provided to the market, I totally agree. This must be, there's many regulations, there are specific requirements also in under European MDR and IVDR Article 10 to have, of course, then controlled validations. That's clear. That's clear for all the labeling and all what the manufacturers put on the market. That's clear. Yeah. For so this, I totally agree.
Maybe to clarify, Stephanie, so in the case, what we would do is we would ask the manufacturer to provide, for example, their IFU in Portuguese that they have certified and validated, and their labeling also in Portuguese, if we're taking Brazil as an example. And that'll be submitted to the authorities, but that comes from the manufacturer, and that's the manufacturer's responsibility to ensure it is certified and validated, that translation. On the other hand, what we would then use the builder is more to fill out, for example, the ANVISA form, right? And support that type of translation, which is there where the RA specialist, the local specialist, would then ensure that the Portuguese used in that form is indeed correct. And again, that has then nothing to do because it's more administrative for the registration with ANVISA versus, of course, the labeling, which would come from the manufacturer directly.
Andre, you had a question?
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Somebody has a question?
I think Andre had a question, but you're on mute.
Yeah, yes, I did. Thank you. First,
Okay.
thanks to Sean and everybody for voting for a Vetsonatron veterinary device. I appreciate it. But I was really interested in today's presentation because we are a medical device engineering and manufacturing company, FDA registered and ISO 13485 certified. And what we, besides our veterinary device, we do all contract development work for customers. And very typically now we have, for example, one customer that's going through a 510K at the FDA, another one going through a PMA. And both of them, they're smaller companies, they're a startup more or less, and they've totally shied away from doing anything internationally because they feel it's just such a high mountain to climb. They just want to stick with the United States, especially with the concerns of MDR and all that. So I was certainly interested in Pure Global and to see if that's something that they're looking for, maybe like a turnkey situation where they can turn this over and really be guided in being able to bring it to other countries. So I know the time is short, but I'd certainly like to speak with you about that.
Yeah, that would be great, Andre. Thank you. And what we do during the initial discussions with all our clients is we can generate a classification, a grouping, a roadmap that is part of the sales process. So if they have certain countries in mind, or they want us to get involved in maybe identifying which markets maybe to focus on first, again, because they have FDA, not CE yet, timelines in the different markets. And then based on the classification and grouping, we can do an initial pathway report, basically.
Sounds good. I'd love to speak with you about that.
Yeah. And in general, I just wanted to, Sean asked me, okay, how do you guys work with consultants? I mean, we recognize that we're really specialized in these global markets that many other companies do not cover. If you have clients and you're working with them for the US or for CE, but they're also interested to go into Latin America or Southeast Asia or the Middle East, for example, we can support you, and we do have I guess an affiliate program, depending on how you want to be involved in the process. We can operate under your umbrella. You can refer to us. You could take on part of the initial process, right? If you would prefer, and use us as the local representative, for example. So all those options are on the table. We're very flexible. We like to work with with peers as much as possible, and see how we can support your clients.
So go ahead and drop affiliate into the chat if you'd like to have a conversation with them about how you might work together. I think this is a strong opportunity, particularly for solo consultants who may have clients who are looking at going into other markets. And I would like to take a moment to thank today's speakers and panelists and audience members for joining us today. We had well over 200 people on the call again. Spread the word, follow along, follow us on YouTube, and join us next week for AIML pitfalls. Thank you. Pure Global, do you want to say goodbye to everybody?
Yes, thank you all very much. We appreciate the invite, Sean. Thank you. It's been a very great experience working with you. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.
Want to connect with the community? Watch the replay and meet people on MLVX.ai.